converting hemp stalks into biochar seems like the most efficient way to sequester as much carbon as possible, at least sequester as much of the carbon that the hemp plant captured as possible. And when I did the lit review for writing that grant, I saw all these articles about making biochar from hemp, but I didn't see any articles about using biochar to grow more hemp. So that's what I want to do.
I'm on board.
That's
completely
me.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining. I'm going to give it a little bit. It always takes a few minutes for everybody to get logged on. But while I do, I'll give my little spiel, Tony, before I turn the microphone over to you and the stage over to you. But I want to remind everybody to log in to Hemp Hallway and on globalhempassociation.org to join our community and watch any of our past videos and content that we've posted. You can log on to our YouTube channel also. But I'm excited. Tony and I were just talking about the connections and the opportunity within the industry and what we're putting together. And my goal really is about driving connections and building relationships. And so however we can help, we're all about it. So Tony, with that being said, you want to give a quick intro and a background, maybe a few minutes about what drives you here?
Well, so I've been in the hemp industry since 2015, when one day I found out that hemp research was legal through the 2014 Farm Bill. And I had been thinking about, if I would go back to school, try and do a master's degree or whatever. And this seemed like the most exciting thing to get into. So I went back to my school, Cal Poly Pomona, and asked my professor, hey, can I come back and do a master's degree and do research on hemp? And it led me down this 6-year adventure. And it's been a pretty wild and interesting ride. And one of the things we were talking about before we went, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Why hemp? When you very first started, what was your aha moment to say hemp is something you wanted to look into? Just because it was new?
Well, I spent a lot of time when I was I'm not sure you would say childhood, but post-adolescence, where there was just an existential dread about what's going on with climate change. And I always knew that I wanted to make a difference in terms of trying to solve for climate change. And when I was in community college, it seemed like the two places to go were either energy or agriculture. And I chose to go into agriculture and study plants. And when I learned about hemp, which 2015 wasn't the first time I learned about hemp, but it was the first time I had thought about it in probably 7 or 8 years.
And probably professionally.
Probably enough.
Yeah.
Sorry?
And probably professionally. First time you'd really...
Right, yeah. And it just seemed like a really exciting opportunity to get in on the base level of something new and different that can also make a really big impact as far as capturing carbon. In fact, my personal mission is to accelerate the advent of economical carbon sequestration. And I see hemp as being a key to that, because hemp will be the linchpin that connects carbon sequestration through more technological means like bioenergy and carbon sequestration with regenerative agriculture. And there's a certain conflict between these two approaches, because on one end, there's the rewilding movement, which sees rewilding as much of nature as possible and restoring as much of nature as possible as the best approach to sequestering carbon. But then the challenges with that is it's really difficult to fully quantify all the CO2 that's being sequestered. The tools for that haven't been fully developed. And then on the other end, there's people who are creating, air mining, carbon capture machines, all that sort of stuff, where it's extremely easy to quantify, but it's also extremely expensive, and unknown if the technology will scale. But there's a hybrid between the two. And I think hemp is what puts them together, as well as being the vanguard for regenerative organic agriculture.
You gave me goosebumps when we started talking about it, because I'm like, yes. And it's funny when I talk about hemp and speak about what is my why, it's so much bigger than I thought it was when I started. I had an idea that it really is that link between energy and power and cars and mechanics and architects and the whole supply chain, right? And so it's pretty exciting. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, like one big thing is just displacing all the different uses of something like coal. Like we've seen coal fired power plants are becoming less and less economical. Like it costs more to operate a coal power plant than it does to install brand new solar with batteries, right? But there's still a lot of coal that's being used because you need metallurgical coal for producing steel. That all needs to be displaced. And there was a producer that I talked to recently from Sweden, and he's making biocarbon as a replacement for coke, for metallurgical coal and coke in the steelmaking industry. And he said that the total forest waste output in Sweden that he can feasibly tap into is 2 million tons. And in order to supply the steel industry of Sweden, he would need 100 million tons.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of low-lying biomass from just waste processes. But once we realize the true scale of material we need, that's going to get exhausted pretty quickly. And we will need crops like hemp to fill in like those biomass for just replacing things that we take for granted, or greening things that we take for granted, like steel, which is everywhere.
Well, in reality, carbon is this icing on the cake, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, it becomes this main product, or could potentially, right? But immediately we have a solution for a lot of immediate problems, or I guess rapidly surfacing problems.
Yeah, it's definitely like the lowest. It's lowest on the value chain in terms of, like, we think of things being filled like highest value and then kind of cascading down. But it's very necessary. But yeah.
Very
so to kind of like, I guess, progress into a little bit more of my story and background, starting hemp here in California and trying to figure out ways to grow hemp. I've got this sign, which is almost like a relic of a previous era somewhat, because before 2019, before June of 2019, the only way you could grow hemp in California was if you worked with an established agricultural research institute, which the World Cannabis Foundation is. We've been around since 1996. And then if you look at Agricultural Code 8100 or 81,000, here, it says that the only people who can grow hemp in California are people with a commercial permit, which the Department of Agriculture was not issuing. The Department of Agriculture itself are exempt from a permit, Institute of Higher Education, and then the broadly defined Established Ag Research Institute. And I went through all three of those from 2015 to 2017, just exhausted all the options before we figured out that this Established Ag Research Institute can mean a 501c3 nonprofit, like the World Cannabis Foundation. And that's what we more or less kicked in the door with. Like in 2018, we grew 400 acres. 2019, our MOUs were used by seed breeders and nurseries to propagate millions and millions of plants that kind of built up the supply chain for people who then went to scale with thousands of acres in 2019 here in California. Because if like all that work hadn't been done, people would have gotten their commercial permits in June of 2019 and been like, where's the seeds coming from? Where are the starts coming from? You know what I mean? And it's just funny, like looking back on it, because the Department of Agriculture just did not want to set up a pilot program. And it was the most frustrating thing ever. But I think back when I started, because they said it was not legal for them to do so. Yet our current vice president, then Attorney General Kamala Harris, issued like a legal opinion just saying right there, it is now lawful for the Department of Agriculture and for universities to grow hemp for research. But I knocked on all of those doors and they just wouldn't open it. But yeah, that's like kind of my background and a little bit of how I got started.
Lots has changed, huh?
Oh yeah, 100%. A lot has changed. I mean, a lot of change after that 2019 harvest, as so many people listening know. But I guess we could go to like my slide.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually really excited to share this and talk about what you do.
Thanks. So yeah, this is our logo. It's the old school one. We have a new school one, but this is still my preferred just because it's retro. And to give you guys more of a background on our organization, created in 1996 by Richard Davis. This is actually our founder. And so much of the energy in hemp now is looking forward, thankfully. But like one thing I love about our organization is the story of our founder, because, you know, he was a farmer up in Mendocino County, grew cannabis there from the 70s all the way onwards. I've been up to his farm. It's just a beautiful place. And he collected hemp artifacts and cannabis related artifacts. And, you know, when he semi-retired from growing in the early 90s, he just started driving around everywhere in the country and setting up at different events, you know, farmers markets or rallies, or, you know, places to educate people about hemp and cannabis, why it should be legalized. You know, back, like you had Larry Serban on and talked about how no one knew about hemp or any of the things it could be made from in the 90s. And that's when like some of these pictures were taken. And, you know, his museum is still in storage. It's been in storage since he passed away in 2014. But it like feels good to be building on a legacy, I guess, that he left behind. And then, you know, he wrote this book, Hemp for Victory, Global Warming Solution, extremely prescient, lined up with everything that I wanted to do. Yeah, I mean, forgive the Swiss cheese like quality of this, but this is like a little still from the video he made in '94 with Richard Marcella, who's another, you know, OG in the cannabis legalization movement here in California. But yeah, this is what Richard like dedicated his life to, and we're continuing his work. I mean, I don't like to like read things off of a PowerPoint slide, but I include like this whole verbiage here about what our mission is. But in a nutshell, we do agronomic research, we educate the public, and we're conducting cultural preservation, you know, through the museum, through our digital assets, particularly about the movement to legalize cannabis. And then this is my personal mission statement about accelerating carbon sequestration.
Awesome. So this is actually turned into a podcast. If you want to read them, you're more than welcome to. And there's some great faces in there that I've had on this show. I see Tom and our
and then this is so you had Tom on the show, Tom Pierce.
Tom. Yeah.
Tom. This is right here is Tom. He did like so much of the work up there in Lemoore. Our mission is to improve the characteristics of low THC cannabis sativa, you know, what's legally called hemp, through rigorous agronomic experiments. We want to develop regenerative organic farming and land stewardship practices for hemp cultivation, initiate and support scientific research into industrial and medicinal uses of hemp, conduct an academic study on the cultural influence of cannabis sativa throughout human history, and educate the public through events and publications on the myriad benefits of cannabis.
Love it.
It's like the big points of our mission. And pursuant to that, I was, you know, been fortunate to collaborate with Bruce over at Drawdown Hemp, and part of that is I created this carbon yield table. And there's like our more modern kind of like updated logo here for the World Cannabis Foundation. We use that a little bit more. But you know, this table breaks down cellulose content, hemicellulose content, lignin, the equivalent amount of carbon in those constituents, and then a conversion of that carbon to metric ton equivalent of CO2. And this line here is the equivalent number of mature trees. I wasn't sure how best to word this, but really what this is that a mature tree will capture 48 pounds of CO2 each year. So what this line here shows is the number of trees, mature trees, in a year, what this tonnage of CO2 is equivalent to. And then the standard for reforesting land is planting 150 mature trees. So we have like a breakdown here of how hemp compares to mature reforested land for capturing carbon. And it compares pretty favorably as you get higher up in the spectrum. For context, most grain varieties, as I understand it, and I'm sure there are people out there watching, listening who know more than I do, but most grain varieties which are short are somewhere in this area between 2 and 3 tons. I think the European varieties grown at the appropriate latitude are here in metric ton per acre. What we observed in Lemoore this year was 6 tons, right about 6 tons, metric tons. And, you know, the goal long term to beat our own record for world's tallest hemp plant would be to find a way to increase yield by 15% to get to 7 tons. And I'm sure there's a ton of different secret sauces and magical inputs and stuff we could do to get that. And it'll be fun to do that, or try to do that next year.
Very cool. This is great. I just actually had a conversation yesterday. It was really hit me in the face at how much education still needs to go out. And the conversation was about carbon and the understanding that there is data available and that people are doing the research. And it's so exciting. Thank you for sharing all this.
Yeah. And the big thing with this, we look at, this is put in terms of carbon yield, but it's also just your dry stock yield. So your materials yield, if you're processing this into whatever value added product it is, like the trick to getting in the upper end of this is primarily genetics, because we've now trialed five different Canadian and European varieties, like Polish, Ukrainian, alongside the Chinese land races. And the Chinese land races just outperform them, like is insane. Part of it is the European varieties and Canadian varieties just flower really early if you're not in the right latitude. But even if you are at that higher latitude that they're used to, and they still grow larger, the Chinese varieties can outcompete them there as well, because they just flower so much later. And I guess we could go through some slides, because numbers are boring, pictures are great. So this picture is from Lemoore. This is April 3rd. This is day 29 after planting, and you see the plants are like 6 inches tall, 7 inches tall or so. And we've got a ton of these little weeds here. You fast forward 2 weeks, and there's still a lot of weeds here. Like, all this are weeds. Right here closer, you can see it. This is fiddleneck. And then all this stuff, all these little yellow patches are weeds. It's like there's like 40% weeds that you can see from this picture. And this was April 17th, which was the same day that we planted some grain varieties on the opposite end. Fast forward another 2 weeks. This is May 5th. And you see the weeds are now like pretty small down here. And then 3 weeks later, this is where we're at. These plants are pretty thirsty, but like you can't really see the weeds anymore. They've been pretty much smothered. And then another month, this is June 26th, I believe. And at this point, we have like 13-foot tall plants that are the outliers here, but the bulk of this is 11, 12 feet tall, and all your weeds are down here. And this is why I'm so excited about fiber hemp as a rotational crop and in use in agriculture, because the big challenge in agriculture and decarbonizing agriculture is getting rid of the three main things that cause the emissions. It's tillage, fertilizer, and herbicide. And the two main approaches can get rid of either tillage or herbicide. But getting rid of both, which would be like a true regenerative organic approach, is still being figured out. And hemp, to me, is the missing ingredient, because you need a crop that can grow this abundantly and provide this kind of like weed suppression every third or fourth year to just clean up a field, to get rid of those residual weeds that can sometimes outcompete your winter cover crops. And fiber hemp is somewhat of a hybrid between a cover crop and a cash crop, because it provides so much value on the back end in your rotation in terms of increasing yields. Like there are studies from Europe where they've seen increased yields for up to 2 years on a plot of land after growing fiber hemp. And the Rodale Institute observed the same thing in their trials doing European varieties. And so I can only imagine what they would see if they had grown some of these Chinese varieties, which are capable of producing so much more. This is the photo that everyone's seen going around on the internet. There's Tom and Larry, who it's just been a real privilege and to be able to collaborate with them. Mm-hmm. And this photo was taken on September 10th. where they, had the Guinness Book of World Records out there, 24-foot tall plant. And the funny thing about this photo to me is they went out there, found this world record setting plant, and the plants were only in like third week of flower. So they still had a bit to grow. And the last time I was out there was, this past weekend on the 23rd. So 60-mile-an-hour wind came through. We got some lodging here, but for the most part, in this quarter-acre stand, most of all the plants are still standing up, and the wind just defoliated them. So all you have left are the buds and the water leaves and stuff around them. But there's like 28-foot tall plants in there. When it's time to harvest, I'm sure we'll find a 28-foot tall plant, and that's going to be really exciting to see. But what you see here and what is important for the industry, what I think the industry in other parts of the country can take from this is the importance of creating seed of these varieties. Because this next picture here, this shows where that plot is in terms of its seed development. And, we started seeing female plants flower there first week of September, a little after. And this is October 23rd. We're 2, maybe even 3 weeks away from these seeds being fully mature. They're really soft. They still look like they're sizing up. Mm-hmm. And like, what does that mean for other parts of the country? It'll be really difficult to produce seed of this outside of California. And I've seen this in several different places in California. Like, this is at my friend's house in Fullerton, where I have clones and selections of these plants flowering. This was about a week before then. This is October 16th, and it's kind of in the same phase of development. And then this is Camarillo just a couple days ago. Like, there's still a little bit to go. And let me see where I'm at. And part of it is just the seeds of this variety are ridiculously large. Like, these are the largest hemp seeds I've ever seen. Most hemp seeds that are out there are between 12 and 18 grams per 1,000 seeds. When I measured this, it was 62 grams per 1,000 seeds. They're just giant. And it takes a long time for a giant seed like that to mature up. And it's because these have their origin in the tropics, southern China.
Man, I think this just goes back to this conversation that we had when we were at SHE. Gary Sykes and I were talking. Well, and he said in general, speaking about selling seeds by the pound, or speaking about, how many pounds per acre we're planting compared to how many seeds, right? Because the size of seed is going to change drastically if we're talking about a pound per acre, how many pounds per acre. Yeah.
And this kind of gets me to, I guess, the call to action of this segment of my presentation, which is, we just look at where first frosts are throughout the country. And, all throughout here, the Central Valley, this is like the region of San Joaquin Valley where we did our trials this year, where those plants are growing. We don't have first frost there until December. And then there are also parts of Imperial Valley I'm looking at where first frost is, also just not until December, maybe in January. So these are really the places where it would be viable to produce seeds of these varieties. And I believe that the greatest value that California can add to a nationwide industrial hemp industry, at least on the farming side, is seed production of these specialized fiber varieties. And I think these fiber varieties like these, besides obviously having a higher potential yield, will have a higher utility to farmers in other parts of the country, like Midwest, upper Midwest, all that, just by virtue of them flowering so late, because you have more flexibility in terms of you can plant later and still get a really good yield. You can have a higher degree of certainty that these plants will not reseed. So if, for example, one of the values you get out of growing hemp is that it cleans up a weedy field, the last thing you would want is to have hemp there as a new weed next year, right? So if you have something where it doesn't start flowering till the first week of September, and your killing frost comes like second, third week of September, you can be like fairly certain that that's not going to reseed. And it could also provide more flexibility, potential flexibility with harvesting, because you're no longer under the gun to harvest before you flower, before you're dropping pollen, and you start losing fiber quality or anything like that. And I've also heard folks from like Montana talk about the upside of frost retting or winter retting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But if you have a variety like dual crop varieties where they're going to flower before winter happens and set seeds before winter happens, everything that's involved with flowering, setting seed, all of that will change your fiber quality, your content, all that sort of stuff. So you wouldn't be able to get the same results as you would with something like this. At least that's what I think people will see as these varieties are growing more frequently.
I've heard a lot of people talk about, not a lot, but I've heard a couple of times in Montana, planting later in the season, which allows and then for it to grow the following season, but it traps the moisture and keeps never mind, I can't even speak to it.
Interesting.
I'll go back and watch and look at what
is it like you leave because they have a stand of stalks that tall, it catches more snow or something? Sure, yeah. So when the snow thaws, you have a more gradual moisture getting into the soil. It's really interesting. I mean, my observable reality is just growing in California. So much about growing in the Midwest is like speculation to me, but I'm really excited to learn more. And I really want to collaborate more with folks in other parts of the country. And, it kind of hinges on it because that's where I see fiber seed production adding value for folks in the other parts of the country. And I added this little chart of day length just to give people an idea. Not to beat a dead horse, I'm sure other guests have talked about this before, but most of the varieties that are out there for fiber or grain or dual crop production were developed north of the 40th parallel. And they developed in this photo period here, this photo period curve. So they're used to seeing, that's 30. Sorry. Yeah, that's 40. So they're used to seeing at least 14 hours of light throughout most of their growing season. And that means you're not going to get like that explosive growth that you see during the photoperiod dependent phase for not but like the middle of June and July. Yeah. Interesting. So, okay. But anyway, with need for seed production trials here in California, this is kind of like, I guess, my ask as a foundation. There's a lot of supply chain and shipping cost instability. As all of us know, the cost to get containers from China has quadrupled, quintupled, whatever the number is. I've heard that a lot of the folks I know are saying that it will take $300,000 to get a 40-foot container of seed from China. And importing seed from China is just unsustainable long term. So we need to have some experiments that will verify the viability of domestic seed production. Here in California, I think there's 3 potential seed production seasons in Imperial Valley from January through April, which I have a colleague who's already proved this out with varieties that he developed. He was working in Oregon, but we haven't tried this with the Chinese varieties yet. San Joaquin Valley, going August through November, is very viable. And in fact, there's a lot of upside to this, this potential here, because this would fit right into rotation with tomatoes. So determinate processing tomatoes are one of the primary annual cash crops in the Central Valley, one of like the most reliable money makers, and they're pretty much all harvested by July. And after the farmers harvest that in July, they have fields that more or less fallow until, maybe some of them will plant winter wheat in like December. So fiber seed production going in August would be a really interesting, rotational crop for them. And then there's the potential of going in either Imperial or San Joaquin from September through December, because we've got that warm autumn where that production can go. So, my goal doing this, trying to see what a model would look like for producing these seeds for farmers in other parts of the country would be to raise funds for 2022 pilot production. And because we're a 501c3 nonprofit, funds we raise would be tax deductible donations. So much of the value proposition is you can save some money on the front end, get a tax deductible donation, and we can still translate that into actionable intel on the back end to lay some tracks for this industry, for the supply chain. That's what your whole show is dedicated to, building supply chain for hemp, and the supply chain for seeds is very, very important. I mean, I already saw that in 2018, 2019, when the rush was for feminized seed.
Well, and we're going to see it more, right? Our acreage is significantly larger than Europe. And so they will not be able to sustain our growth if we do not have another way to provide seeds or produce seeds.
Absolutely. And we will see more differentiation between, I think there'll be 3 primary models for hemp production. There's going to be the dual crop model, the fiber model, which will both be agronomic in nature, and then smokable hemp will, more and more segregate into a more and more specialized horticultural crop, resemble cannabis more and more over time. But the distinctions between fiber type and dual crop will really start to show in the coming years, because the nutrient demand you need for a dual crop type hemp and for fiber hemp are a little bit different. I mean, they're both pretty hungry, but so much of the nutrient in a dual crop variety leaves your field in the form of those flowers and those seeds that it's almost like dual crop hemp is a cash crop that would displace another cash crop like corn or soy, whereas fiber hemp is almost like a value add, like a cover crop with this whole value add engine behind it that makes it easier for you to grow corn and soy like in the following years. At least that's my theory of where things are going. Farmers in the Midwest can correct me because they have a lot more.
There was a question asked if you are aware of any research that was done to show increased yields on rotation crops. Are you aware of any of that?
Yeah, there's a paper from Gorks and Lloveras, I think that's how it's pronounced, these researchers in Spain, where they saw increased yields in winter wheat for the 2 following years. And the bump from the first year was pretty remarkable. If I remember it correctly, it was, I can't say the exact number. I don't remember the exact number.
I've heard people I've heard people say anywhere from 20 to 30%. And I don't know what.
Yeah, that might be right.
Just farms, right? I'm not aware specifically, but yeah, I have heard a pretty good yield increase.
Yeah, and the Rodale Institute, if you go on their page about their trials with hemp, they saw similar things with soybeans. The info on that is a little less precise. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it's out there. We can provide some of the links in the info after the live stream. But yeah, let me see, where was I at?
Need for seed trial production.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and this is kind of like a transition just to go to like the back half of my presentation, I guess, which is continuing variety trials. And this is from my day job, where my day job is commercializing a set of hemp genetics that were bred for exotic terpene production, kind of commercializing it as smokable flower. This is a trial we did on a variety that's been in development here. This picture was taken October 19th, and these plants were direct seeded on July 22nd. And we have some just monster plants in here, 8-foot tall plants. Granted, a lot of this is like the climate here in Ventura County is very agreeable. And then you throw some berry hoops on top of that. It's like great for growing plants. But these plants also triggered very late. So the trigger time on the Yuma, which we were looking at in the fiber varieties previously, is like 13 hours, a little under 13 hours. And I observed the same thing in this variety. And I have an interest in exploring these varieties as dual crop or potentially tri-crop hemp varieties. And that's something I want to do trials with like next year. But, this is kind of a pivot point into what I do for my day job. Like I said, my day job is Veyra Farms. We're commercializing smokable hemp varieties from this collection. And then here's some pictures of what smokable hemp looks like. It's very much like cannabis. In fact, the markets, I'm sorry?
I said it smells like it, tastes like it.
Yeah, the markets, like the old paradigm of hemp and cannabis being separate things is kind of getting blended and remixed to where, smokable hemp and smokable cannabis, or just any kind of smokable flower, will become a separate industry. And then what you want to get, everything else you want to get out of the plant, whether it's metabolites, secondary compounds, fiber grain, you name it, it's going to be more efficient to get that out of an agronomic system, agronomic cropping system that will, over time, more and more resemble traditional hemp farming. So for smokable flower, like in the early stages of our industry, like during the CBD boom, CBD rush, we saw people applying all of these like intensive horticultural practices to outdoor production, like 60-inch off-center Christmas tree type plants. And I have believed for a while that's like a byproduct of a really early immature market, because like that style of production is so inefficient in terms of agronomy compared to just seeding 1 million seeds per acre and then coming back with a combine and just combining it all. You know what I mean?
I do. I've been saying the same for a long time. Yes.
Right. So, like this is where smokable hemp is going. And, these are pictures of our greenhouse, what our product looks like. And the differentiator in smokable hemp, and like a lot of the coming products that are going to be made from these varieties, is this Phytofacts report. Like I'm not sure. Have you seen this before, Mandi?
No.
Anyone talked about this? No. So yeah, this is the Phytofacts report. Our breeder developed these in-house as a guide for the breeding program that we have here. And the kind of like sales pitch I've come up with is, you wouldn't buy a car without checking the Carfax. So don't buy some smokable hemp without checking the Phytofacts. Mm-hmm. And this explains all of the things you need to know about the terpenes that are in the samples, in particular, how it relates to the aroma and flavor profiles they have, some of the entourage effects, because these terpenes are really powerful secondary metabolites that have make a real difference in terms of the effect that the end user gets out of these products.
In fact, the more educated I become, the more important the terpene is.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of like starting from the top, like of the report, there's these three colors here, which are color indicators for the dominant terpenes that are in the variety. Up here at class, there's 3 letters and then a number and then a second letter. So these 3 letters represent the top 3 terpenes that were found in the sample. In this case, P stands for pinene, C stands for caryophyllene, and then X means the next terpene was not significant in contributing to the flavor profile. 3 means it's chemotypically, or its cannabinoid chemotype is type 3, which means type 3 cannabis is hemp, dominant in CBD. And then the letter T here is representative of the next most common cannabinoid in the cannabinoid profile. So when you look at the cannabinoid profile here, this chart here shows you the ratio of your top 2 cannabinoids, in this case, 31.9 total CBD to 1 total THC. And then here is a percentage like table of the cannabinoids that were found in significant numbers in the sample. We've got these spider charts here that try to give you a visual index of the aroma and flavor, and then the entourage effects spider chart here does a similar thing, but for like the effects that you're feeling. And then this phytoprint has a color-coded breakdown of these terpenes. So the goal with this was so that we can present objectively and by the numbers a way of quantifying what people are smelling, tasting, experiencing when they look at some hemp flower or cannabis flower, because so much of the marketing of these products is wrapped up in like flowery language, the sales pitch, like, and always trying to remind people, like, yeah, it smells like OG, doesn't it? And people kind of forget what these things really smell like, or it's so fungible. And this is to the purpose of this is to add some real data and numbers and a visual index that people can use to really map these products and really help the consumer. So you see a really high contrast between these two varieties. This is really high in pinene, and this one here is really high in caryophyllene. It's like almost like a monocaryophyllene type, the classic cookies. And most of the varieties in the smokable market that are selling, and what I found, what the market really wants, are typically high in caryophyllene, because this is what most resembles the flower products in the cannabis market and the most popular flavors in the cannabis market. And a big part of the reason for that is because caryophyllene in itself is a minor agonist of the CB1 and CB2 receptors. So caryophyllene is very like pharmacologically active with your endocannabinoid system, and it has ways of triggering those receptors and providing a very different effect from what other terpenes do, particularly like myrcene.
Interesting. Okay. I love learning about this stuff. I'm like a kid in a candy jar right now.
Right. So like, these next two sets show, just between these two, you see how much diversity and variation there can be between different terpene profiles, especially like, what's been bred and selected for using gas chromatography. So here with the pineapple jam, this is really reminiscent of like Pineapple Express or classic Maui Wowie, that real like pineapple type smell, which is what ocimene is really associated with. And the effect of ocimene is kind of like calming but energizing. Yeah. And this fourth phytofact here, this is from Abacus, and this is more representative of what most of the hemp varieties that are out in the market have in terms of terpene profiles, which is really, really high amounts of myrcene. And this is because myrcene is pretty dominant in terms of its genetic expression. Like you breed with plants that have myrcene, you'll get a lot of myrcene. And minor changes in this terpene profile on the secondaries and tertiaries here can do a lot to make a myrcene dominant flower sample smell different. So that's why there's grape, cherry, berries, cantaloupe, melon, all these things, mango. All of these are kind of different permutations of myrcene. So even though like the end consumer, and this is why I think the phytofacts and phytoprint is real important, even though the end consumer can see all this variation between these different odor profiles, all of these are dominant in myrcene. So when they use the product, they end up having the same effect, which, to be honest, the combination of myrcene and CBD is a little bit of a downer. Like myrcene is a very sedating, it's a very sedating kind of effect. And that's part of the reason why caryophyllene dominant varieties are so popular, like on the cannabis market. And now that there are varieties entering the hemp market that have caryophyllene, have some of these other, other terpenes, they're going to start seeing more popularity, more adoption.
This is cool. I love learning this.
And then I guess these are the last two that I'll show. It's Legendary Jack. This is really high terpenylene associated with a lot of energy. A lot of the terpenylene dominant cannabis strains, like the Jack Herer strain, which this Legendary Jack is named after, tend to be known for giving you that really energizing and focused high. For some users, it can be a little bit anxiety inducing, that thing that makes you feel like your thinking is speeding up and you're kind of speeding up. But in a type 3 like hemp variety, it's really nice. It gives you like, the CBD gives you that body relaxation, but you're still feeling kind of alert. And, for posterity, I included a phytofacts from SC Labs. for a cannabis variety. So this one shows something that's really high in THC. And SC Labs recently licensed the Phytofacts report from us, and SC Labs here in California is really, you order a terpene analysis from them. They will report that to you in the form of this Phytofacts report here. And their adoption of it is part of why I believe this will become an industry standard for presenting, any kind of flower or even concentrate based product.
Well, there's just so much in the product that's not required to be shared, like the terpene profile. And it's just being aware of what is really creating the effects that you're seeking.
Absolutely. And we're probably in like the second or third inning of figuring out what all these different compounds in the plant are really capable of doing. It's pretty exciting. Also, like this, I didn't have something with a limonene caryophyllene profile here, but like a phytoprint like this is what produces some of the most popular flavors in the cannabis market. The cakes, cookies, all that sort of stuff. It's like limonene caryophyllene LCX.
Limonene smells good.
Yeah. And my last slide here is a product that I encountered it's not hemp related, but I saw this in a Whole Foods, and I think this is the shape of things to come, especially as it relates to terpenes. This sparkling hop tea, as we all know, hops is the most closely related plant to cannabis. They're very similar, and in fact, hops produces some pretty similar terpenes to cannabis and hemp. Particularly like a lot of myrcene and humulene. Humulene is its namesake after all. So when I saw this hop tea in Whole Foods, I couldn't help but try it. And there is 100% an effect there. And it's definitely the myrcene. Like your body feels heavy after drinking this tea. And to me, this is a forerunner of like terpene infused beverages, terpene infused products that, the industry, food processors, manufacturers, et cetera, will gradually have more green light to develop and put out there into the market. And products like this, but infused with hemp terpenes, hemp-derived essential oils, are going to be what creates the demand for terpene scaling, because terpenes and essential oils are an extremely scalable production process. I mean, you look at how lavender essential oils are farmed. You can just port that right over to hemp. And
I'm in Utah, where there's essential oils everywhere. I always go back when I talk about this entourage effect, and I, especially in Utah, refer to all the oils all the time.
Yeah. So that's more or less my presentation. That kind of covers just about everything I thought to talk about. I mean, I guess I could talk about my biochar grant. I got a grant to study biochar, and we're going to be doing a 2-year study with biochar up at the same Lemoore field. Where we took the pictures and stuff.
Yes.
So I'm pretty excited about that, because converting hemp stalks into biochar seems like the most efficient way to sequester as much carbon as possible, at least sequester as much of the carbon that the hemp plant captured as possible. And when I did the lit review for writing that grant, I saw all these articles about making biochar from hemp, but I didn't see any articles about using biochar to grow more hemp. So that's what I want to do.
I'm on board. I completely believe in your team. I believe and trust you. So congrats and all the good work. There've been lots of comments. One question that I had, back to the beginning of your presentation on your field, how was it planted, and what was the volume at which you planted? How many seeds per acre or pounds per acre? What did you do?
We used a grain drill. The grain drill had like 7-inch spacing between the drills between the plantings, and there were like 50 pounds to 80 pounds that were trialed. I think Larry and Tom went all the way up to 130 pounds. And as we mentioned before, like pounds does not always scale to number of seeds, right? So 50 pounds of that UMA seed is probably like half the number of individual seeds as you would get if you were to do 50 pounds of like Bialobreski or something. Mm-hmm. Well, Bialobreski in particular, like the seeds on Bialobreski were just tiny, tiny, tiny. And that's an interesting correlation too, because you think about like, in order to grow a really large fiber type plant in Europe and produce seeds of it, you have to flower really late. So by necessity, you will end up with way smaller seeds because they have such a short amount of time to make a seed. But I would say that once we got to the point of like 80 pounds past that, from the outside, when you observe that edge effect, it looks like you got, oh, holy crap, there's a lot more plants. But once you bushwhack and you get into there, there's a little bit of a self-thinning that goes on. And there's actually like a decent amount of literature that goes into this. Like there's some European researchers, Amaduchi, like he's published a ton of stuff. Like him or one of the people who work with him published some papers about this like self-thinning effect in super dense plantings. So that would lead me to say that I think the consensus of 900,000 to 1 million seeds per acre is probably correct.
Cool. Very, very cool. There's lots of comments here. Milan, of course, is super excited and proud. I have to tell you, I'm thrilled with what you're doing. I'm excited about everything you're building.
Oh, thank you.
Milan, you too. You're a rock star if you're still listening yourself.
Yeah, Milan is awesome. Milan is awesome.
Incredible connections. She's such a great support. So Tony, how do people get in touch with you if they want to support your research, they have questions? What are avenues to reach out and really get involved?
I'd say the best way to contact me would be through my email address, which is tony@wcf.museum. You could also call me. I mean, 760-403-3887. Like every like spam caller already has my number. I get like 4 or 5 a day, so it's not like I'm at risk of getting any more. We're from the auto department, here to call. Like I get earlier this year
all the time.
Earlier this year, I went to a processing facility.
Yeah.
It's like this large trim house up in the Central Valley. Me and my business partner, and then those 2 guys who were over there. In the 20 minutes we were sitting there talking, 3 of the 4 of us got the same spam call from the vehicle warranty department. It's just, crazy.
That's fishy.
But yeah.
So did you say it's WCF.museum?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I'm going to share it on here for you.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, what can we do to support? What are opportunities?
Well, I'm looking to raise funds for these 2022 pilot projects. I want to do some pilot seed production with the UMA in Imperial Valley. Like that one's coming up because we would be planting in January, and then do a pilot production in Lemoore in August. And depending on how that goes, that could give us some information about one, is it economically viable, right? Because the first thing we need to see is what do the seed yields on these really look like at scale. And I know one person who tried to do seed production of this in Indiana already, and they only got like 300 pounds, which is very, very low. And I do not believe would be economically viable if that's the numbers we saw. That said, Indiana, it's highly variable weather. They probably lost half their seeds or more to freezes there. So if we can get in the range of, it seems like the average for most varieties, even people who are just reclaiming feral hemp varieties, is 1,000 pounds. If we can get that, I think that would be very viable, because I think that the industry or fiber planting seed industry should target like $5 a pound at maturity. I know the cost of these Chinese seeds right now is closer to like $8 or more per pound, just because they're being imported and there's all these costs related to it. But if we can get somewhere in that range of 1,000 pounds an acre yield, I think that'll be financially sustainable, so that everyone in the supply chain, the seed farmer and the growers who are planting that seed, and then the processors who are taking the material down chain of that, are are able to make a living.
Awesome.
And that's the most important thing that I have in mind, this project for the foundation that I want to raise money about. And if there's anyone who wants to reach out to me and talk to me about it, we can have further conversations. Like I mentioned earlier, so like our model is we provide some value to you on the front end in the form of your tax deduction, right? So then whatever intel we're able to get out of doing these trials is just further upside. Yeah. And, you can be some of the first movers on that information, I guess, to, put seeds into production for if you're a processor and you've got like a large processing facility, you got to figure out where the seeds are going to come from that your farmers are going to grow. That's what we've done.
Yes, I'm so glad. Okay, so talk to me real quick about water. I got into a little bit of a debate about the water you need, and it's very frustrating in the reality of people walking around and saying hemp doesn't need water. Hemp, hemp can grow anywhere.
Hemp needs water. I mean, you saw those slides I showed, like both, like those pictures from May. Those were some pretty thirsty plants. I mean, you saw them. they definitely didn't die, but there's also a difference between plants that look sad like that during the day, and if they look sad like that during the night. If they still look sad like that when it's nighttime, you definitely need to add water, and that's kind of like the drawing line for like deficit irrigating. But so much of the information that's out there that people have relied upon, like take for example the classic thing of hemp is 4 times more water efficient at producing fiber than cotton. That's based off of hemp would use half as much water but produce twice as much fiber per acre, right? That's also based on some old information about where cotton farming was like 30 years ago. 30, 40 years ago, a lot of cotton farming here in California was all still flood irrigated. Now they've made some huge steps in increasing efficiency using drip. Most producers of cotton can raise cotton on like 30 inches of water, something like that. Whereas back in the day, when that number came up, it was like 48 inches, which 48 inches is what the almond orchard uses. Almond orchards use a lot of water. I was about to digress there. I'll stop there. But yeah, what we saw
is that you got old data and old information is being shared, right? And that reality that hemp is still a crop and it still needs to be treated as
such. So what we saw, and Larry might have talked about this when he was on in Lemoore, was that the stands there, like those plants that they took a picture of, because that reflects most of what was harvested, most of like everything that has been harvested for fiber only there was harvested between August and September, used about 20 inches of water. So maybe some of the earlier ones did a little bit more than that. I don't know the exact numbers for water that's been applied since that was totaled back in August, but it wouldn't surprise me if the plot that's still standing, the one that has the pictures of, it got knocked around by the wind and it's all going to seed. It wouldn't surprise me if the total water consumption of that is somewhere in the range of 26 inches or something like that. And that would be for a plant that was planted March 5th and will likely be harvested November 15th or something, or November 20th. And then, cotton still using more water, but the contrast is not as dramatic as it was back in the day. Right. Because of the efficiency of drip irrigation. Right. But you're still looking at producing twice as much per acre, right? So
yeah. Alexander made a comment real quick. He said across the Midwest, we still only recommend 10 to 15 inches of rain. And I think that speaks to, Montana is going to be very different than
absolutely
compared to California or even Florida, right? When we were in North Carolina, we saw empty fields because they had too much water. And so it's definitely,
especially your soil texture, because the fields we did there in Lemoore, just a very sandy silt loam, kind of just very well drained. So if you're on something that's more clayey, in addition to holding more water, you would be more sensitive to adding more water, right? Which a lot of the Midwest is pretty clay soils, as I understand it.
I gotcha.
And people from the Midwest, please educate me more. I want to learn more about how hemp is farmed in the Midwest, and I want to spend I want to spend time next year visiting farmers in the Midwest and seeing how it's growing in other parts of the country.
Let's legit do that. I would love to go on a road trip.
And get farmers in the Midwest trialing varieties, like that picture I showed earlier of something I'd like to put into like dual crop or tri-crop trials.
Yeah. Okay. Well, shout out to anybody that's listening that has a farm. We are really hitting the road next year multiple times to see not just the harvest and the planting in the field, but also the manufacturing and processing. So give us a shout out. And Kayla, I'm giving you a shout out as well. We'll be out to see you or pick you up and take you with us. Let's see. Jennifer, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining. And then we'll sign off here in just a second, but full of sand in the
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then let's discuss. We'll be out there, Alexander. Okay. One more question. When you harvested, did you harvest with a sickle bar or what did you do to cut or what are you using?
Sickle bar mower.
Yeah.
Single?
Single bar?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
If I'm honest with you, I wasn't there at harvest, unfortunately. It's like, harvest there coincided with harvest down here, like in the greenhouse, doing greenhouse things, going crazy.
You're working your job, your 2 jobs.
Well, yeah, two hats, right?
Yes, exactly. 2. Well, thank you so much for everything. I really, really appreciate it. Again, Tony, however we can support Global Hemp Association is all in. We've got a number of members that I know would love to connect. So I invite you and your organization to get as involved as you'd like. And then if anybody else needs anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us and pick us up. I guess we'll be back next week. We've got a carbon meeting on November 2nd. I think it's 2 p.m., 1 or 2 p.m. But you can find that on the Global Hemp Association under events or hemphallway.com. And then Tony, anything else before we sign off?
No, I'll try to think of something witty, but I can't.
That's good. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you. And thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do, Mandi. You're doing such a good job of connecting people. I've met so many great people through the Global Hemp Association. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Love hearing it. Thank you very, very much. Have a good day, guys.
All right. Bye.